Welcome to Achieving True Customer 360 with Tian LaRue, Chief Architect, EXAH.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's a great privilege to be able to speak in Basecamp this year. We're very proud sponsors, and we really hope that you get the most from this session. I think it's very different this year, obviously, because this is being done remotely. It does give us certain advantages, and I really do want to encourage using the opportunity to come and speak to our team. We've got multiple architects at our session. It really will be worth quite a bit. So my name is Tian LaRue. I'm the Chief Architect at EXAH. And just a quick background for EXAH, for those who don't know it. We started as a sales and service consultancy company, and what we saw happen was every single time we left the client within 2 or 3 months, the old behavior was back. So we needed to start instilling the behavior that we were trying to do inside a system. And the natural choice there was Salesforce. We were Salesforce clients before, and we were frustrated with the implementation. And it wasn't a surprise from our consulting background that our consulting and the way we were consulted was not sufficient to truly extrapolate all the information that was necessary to do a good implementation. So we started building the entire practice around an idealized design to implement Salesforce projects. So today, especially, the primary topic is about the buzzword everybody loves to throw around, which is Customer 360. People often don't understand about Customer 360 is that it is far beyond just a single view of the customer. It has a lot to do with understanding every single part of the interaction with the customer. So what we're trying to do is to simplify a lot of times what that actually means. So a very important concept that we want to instill in this is the concept of data as symbols. So a very easy example to get is words themselves are symbols. If I say, for example, the word tree, the image that comes into your mind for a tree will be vastly different than the image that comes into my mind, as it is with every person. The problem with data, if you see it in the same spectrum, is that I can tell you something about both of these trees. I can tell you it has leaves. I can tell you that it has branches. I can tell you that it has a bark. I can tell you that it has roots. All those descriptors are both true for both of these pictures, but if you look at the pictures, you understand that they are significantly different. So ultimately, what becomes important is the more descriptors we have, and again, the more detail there is to detail, the more clear the picture becomes. But you can sometimes get a bit of a shortcut that is unique to data, the concept of metadata. So if I gave you metadata around this picture, I would say one of them has a white background and has been drawn in a line style. That instantly tells you more than just more descriptors in terms of the data. So if we see it like that, when you start looking at data again, data to some degree is just words. It's just words and symbols. It is just numbers. It is elements that ultimately are either interpreted by a human and that are interpreted by a machine, but they aren't themselves real. It's one of the great things that we sometimes struggle to grasp, that we build these enormous systems that we never ever touch, but they exist and they make a very big difference in our business. What is important, though, is if you start looking at how the data is manifested, the decisions you make about which parts of this view are core to your business. If you decide that the primary objects for us, for those who know Salesforce, is customer and quote and order, it's one of those things such as the theory of constraints where you can't have multiple bottlenecks. You almost always have one or two bottlenecks that exist, and as soon as you solve them, the others become prevalent. It's the same with data. You can't make all objects equally important. You have to decide which of the objects that you work with are crucial to your business operation and start building the rest of the system around that. So what does it take to develop a complete customer 360 focused system? Now, if you look at that, and we're going to start broad, if you start looking at Salesforce's investment path over the last 10 years, you're going to see a very, very, very key pattern that I'm going to try and explain as we go on. The acquisition path goes through, at sometimes, if you weren't looking closely, some of it looks random. The move from platform to Einstein to e-commerce to integrations such as MuleSoft, recently Tableau. Each one of these acquisitions have been pushing towards a very specific horizon. Now, a metaphor we'll keep coming back to is the metaphor of software and chess. So if you see these different systems, and this is not necessarily just the Salesforce systems, this is all the systems that play together in your business. If you see them all together, you can start saying, I've got this piece and that piece, and based on these pieces, you can form very specific strategies that are very different than if you change the pieces. If you understand chess well, you also understand that even though it's a small board, there is an infinite amount of configurations that you can have, infinite amount of moves. There are patterns that are the same that we've got certain patterns in software that's the same. But the very early lesson is having the same software as another company is by no means an indication that your implementation will be the same. So what we often see when we walk into businesses is a very, very fractured existing state. If we looked at our data and we split it into two broad categories, our operational data and our core data. Both of these are important, but what we sometimes see if you look at the two circles on the inside is some of these systems manifest in a way that they can work together. Some of them exist completely outside that circle. They're not integrated with anything. The integration layers around them often don't exist. So you see these point-to-point connections between two systems that starts becoming a bit of a spaghetti nest after a while. What often then happens with the purple circles is that the reporting also happens piecemeal across these systems without them happening in full. And the green line is your customer experience layer. Your customer experience in terms of your digital or the digitization of your business only exists within certain parts of your data. Some of them are not accessible even if you wanted to make them accessible. So what we want to move towards, and I'll go into more detail into the picture on the right, that is the idealized design in terms of what is possible with software at this stage and in terms of how these systems can be set up. So the difference between that picture and the first one is the operational systems all exist within a core that can work together. But you'll notice that the integration layer spans all of them. There are none of the systems that fall outside this integration layer, which means if we expand that further, that if you choose to make any piece of information available to any other part of the business or within any other part of the system, that is possible even if you choose not to do that. If you then add your customer experience layer, not directly tied to one of those circles, but above your integration layer, what starts happening is when you start creating customer experiences, your communities and your website, you have the possibility of actually using every part of the information that you have available in your company. Now, going back to that first slide where we were talking about the Salesforce acquisitions, if you now look at this same map and you start seeing the acquisitions that Salesforce made, inside you'll notice a lot more systems, both on the operational and the core systems, can be replaced with systems and processes that exist within Salesforce. You will then also notice that the integration layer is served by software such as MuleSoft, which is incredible at handling how all of these connections ultimately work and avoids you having to create these point-to-point connections between every one of these systems. All of them connect with MuleSoft, and MuleSoft becomes the bus through which they communicate. Then the external layer, when you start looking at your customer experience layer, you've got products like Heroku and Community Cloud and Marketing Cloud. Some of these systems touch both sides of the circle. And then with your widest one, if you really want to get this full view for the first time, because often that's the problem, you start the view from the wrong angle. You want to get the view of the entire whole, which is now possible because you have an integration layer that wraps around it. What is crucial, though, and something we see a lot, is the investment decisions you make are absolutely critical. If you understand chess again, even though the board is the same, the difference between a grandmaster and a beginner is vast, even though they play with the same pieces in the same way. What is also critical is when you walk into a scenario where there weren't enough investments decisions made in order for you to win the game, where from the start, the way that it was set up is you might have skimped on certain licenses for a certain part of your business, or you might have skimped on a crucial product that ultimately means that a lot of the strategies that would generally work are not available to you. So the investment decisions that you do make around the licensing in your approach is absolutely critical. And if we go back to this idealized picture where Salesforce's entire suite of products are actually placed over this map, you'll see why we were and are excited about developing on the Salesforce platform. What is crucial, though, is there's a misnomer and a misunderstanding about what out of the box means. So oftentimes when we start a project, we get the instruction from the client to say they wanted vanilla, they wanted out of the box. What we've seen, and again, if you take the chess analogy, is even though that board is there, even though the patterns are the same for certain moves, there is an infinite amount of moves. So in the same way, if you start looking at the complexity and the size of the software, it's a lot like a Lego set where there's a beautiful picture in the front, and when you open the box, it looks like that. It's technically true that these parts will fit together, but you still have to do the work in order to do that. The problem we have, though, that we see a lot is that customer experiences are evolving a bit faster than we can deliver. And this isn't exactly slowing down. There's a new normal in what is being expected that a lot of companies are just trying to play catch up the entire time without ever getting to the point where they can, to some degree, be as nimble as their competition. And we often see a lot of these symptoms appear, such as your business struggles to truly get the value from its IT investment. Your customers have expectations of IT and workflow for service delivery that you just can't achieve. As we indicated earlier, if your systems do not touch all those parts, there will be parts of your business that to some degree are invisible to the systems. You're sometimes being outdated by a smaller and more nimble competition, even though they have less funding than you. And you struggle to complete this 360 view of what's happening with the customer. Now, where it really becomes a problem, where it starts costing you money, is this ultimately starts developing a delivery gap. And this delivery gap we've seen is one of the most dangerous things that occurs in the business. So the example we like to use is if you think of a car with all of the controls that you have for that car, and we just change a single variable, and that's how quickly the car responds when you choose to turn. What now suddenly happens is if I say I'm going to slow that response by 5 seconds, would you still be able to drive that car? And the answer is no. You would not have the confidence to drive it around the block simply because it's responding too slowly to input. In the same way, and what we're seeing now is, ironically, the more systems we have and the more data points we have, the more this delivery gap just keeps growing. IT departments struggle more and more to deliver in terms of what the business ultimately requires. So we're on a mission to see how do we build our systems and the systems for our clients in a way that gives you that flexibility, that helps you scale in future. And this is to some degree a quick indication about how we actually achieve that. So if we walk into a situation like this, the exact same thing where you've got disparate systems that are not intelligently connected, your workflows do not span all of your systems, you've got coordination paralysis and a delivery gap that keeps forming, you have no clear map of what's happening across all of your systems. You have a lack of technology that stops you from being able to tie all of this stuff together. You have piecemeal and uncoordinated fixes to problems rather than a broad approach that understands all of these systems. And you struggle with legacy system digitization that just doesn't seem like you can embed it. This old thing about this system can never be touched is too crucial for the business. So again, how do we solve that? How do we move from that situation towards something where we truly get this customer 360? So as a very start, as we indicated earlier, thinking of the chess pieces is crucial. There's a specific business requirement that you have that has a unique license mix that is actually successful at solving that problem. What we try and do when we do that is we've got various steps that we go through to first understand the business well enough, and then to map with the customer in a way that is predictable across all of the hemispheres that are important to IT projects. That would be your service-scape blueprinting. It would be your shared ERDs that we design. And the focus of all of that stuff revolves around a very specific quote again by Albert Einstein that said that you should never try and shoot for the solution before you understand the problem clearly. And understanding the problem is close to 90% of what we do, because problems can be expressed in so many ways and they manifest in a real way that helps you actually always make a difference. And again, as a primer to systems theory, wherever you observe a problem is very rarely where you solve that problem. So what we do in order to actually find these problems is a proprietary blueprinting method where this is just a quick snapshot that looks at the user journeys, both inside and outside, at a very, very granular perspective. And we always map it as it is right now, because we believe you do not move a fence before you understand why it's there. That even if we build a new system and we start in the next step with idealized design, we can only truly do that if we deeply understand how your business works. After that occurs, we start doing an idealized design for the first time, where we start connecting these different paths to their actual reflection inside the data. And again, that old argument we had earlier, where what is important to your business needs to be reflected in a way in the object models, in a way that's also easy for you to understand. After that, the development starts, and this is one of the most crucial parts about our practice as well. Development is on point every single time when you make sure that your blueprinting is comprehensive and detailed. And we make sure on our side that even the developers that are ultimately going to involve the system understand the business workflows well enough for them to be able to do a very successful project. After the development cycle, and this is an equation that you can basically equate to a rocket. Even if it took 2 years to build a rocket, the most important time is that 5 minutes that it goes up into space. We have very, very dedicated processes that make sure through multiple phases of adoption, through multiple phases of testing, that the solution that was built is on point. And wherever something drifts, to be able to bring it back fast enough so that the delivery gap doesn't grow beyond the point where it becomes sustainable. And then after that, we have a continuous operational involvement. There's this old saying that a good system is never done. It's only bad software that it's ever done and doesn't evolve anymore. So we leave room that in future you do want to keep expanding on the system, that we need to build the system every single time, that you will be able to build further on what it means to your business. And again, we're proud to be able to say that we implement basically every single part of the Salesforce ecosystem. And we incentivize our staff on our side to try and be as broad as possible and not to silo themselves, so that they can understand how all of this stuff will ultimately fit together. Thank you very much for attending it. We really, really do hope that we can see you at our stall. Please speak to our architects. We can have longer sessions that we can dive into any of the problems you have. And we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.